Good evening and welcome back to Stationeers. Tonight's going to be a little bit more interesting than normal. During recording, I didn't realize that my microphone was not working properly, or in fact at all. So I had to add this in post edit. So all the exciting stuff that entails. Tonight's plan is to upgrade LarRe, the new LarRe setup. As you can see here that I've got it started. And the idea is to expand it to add fertilizer into the mix too. And I later discovered that I got to do a little bit of assuming with the fertilizer because you can't actually read the fertilizer slot in the hydroponics tray. So made for an interesting time, but I'll post that video of the code powwow here soon. But in the meantime, I'm trying to figure out how exactly I want to go about getting this all lined up. One of the most difficult things of this whole process was actually finding a place to put the LarRe dock. So you have to worry about it swinging and hitting walls, and in this iteration I thought I had that solved until I put the walls up for the individual lanes. So my thought process on that was to be able to isolate each crop and provide it its ideal grow conditions. So if it actually wanted warmer temperatures, I could provide that. I haven't actually analyzed the plants to see how mutually exclusive some of them can be. Obviously, give them all a default, I think 100 kPa, 25 degrees. I think they're happy as long as they've got the oxygen or the carbon dioxide or the nitrogen that they need. But I want to make sure that I can grow them in their ideal conditions, which might be a little bit overkill. So the thought here is to have a sorter so I can sort out the seeds for each lane and control that from there so that the programming doesn't care, obviously. So the first bin there is going to be the seed, the second one is the fertilizer, and then the third bin there is the export bins. What I'm doing right here is checking to see which one is the pass-through and which one is the filtered output of the sorter, because I didn't have a good way of remembering that. Now, a good way to remember that is that the input and the output that's on the same side of the input are going to be the discharge, the blacklist side, so to speak. And then the right output, depending on how you look at it, but the one that's not in line with the input is the filtered output. Now the next part here is trying to figure out the spaghetti mess at which I will have. And yeah, did figure that I needed to move it one back so I had room for cabling. Yep, specifically the power cabling for the bus. Now, one of the problems, the stackers consume 50 watts at idle, and the sorters are the same, I believe. Stackers I know for sure. So this can be power intensive. In the future, what I want to do is find a way to turn those stackers on and off as needed. For the splitters, so to speak, they don't have any reason to be on if they don't have anything on the input side. Then I'm wondering if I can read if there's something in the output. So if it had split and it's waiting to discharge, then maybe have it turned off. But that's for another day. Here we're trying to plug LarRe in and doing it in a sane way. So now this orientation for LarRe would have worked just fine had I not put the wall up that kept LarRe isolated. So that's why it took me a while to discover that that's a problem. Because okay, I just had to rethink, because if there's chutes to the left, if it would have hit it, but I think it still would have cleared, because there's one more little micro grid worth of space there. So, and would have worked. And yeah, I do wish that there was a little bit more modern interface to the sorters, so you have to have a full-blown computer plugged in to actually set the sorters. Which they have a data disk slot, but you can't do anything with that. That would be very handy if they did. But alas, you work with what you got, and I'm trying to, in this particular case, I'm trying to figure out where to set it, because I'm going to have to do this across multiples. So ideally, I don't want to keep moving this sucker. And I was also thinking that I'm going to want to have a battery and a transformer or something, so I can regulate the power. So I decided this side would be probably the best. I'm going to have a couple rows here for sorting the output and redirecting seeds and all that. Now again, here I knew that I needed a battery in the system, and I was trying to figure out the best place to put it and dealing with the space that I got. And I realized at some point that I'm going to move the stairs eventually, And actually, if when I go to put up the individual lanes, I discover that the stairs are in the way because I'm not paying attention at the moment because I've got that short ceiling there, and I'm not thinking about it at the moment. Took me a moment to realize that I had the battery backwards, so I had to turn it around. And I came to the realization here that I should have moved the battery over one slot because I was plugged into the wrong port. So if I ever wanted the, well, if I ever wanted the data network actually plugged in, then I would have to move it over. And I was contemplating that because I only plan to use the power. So I went back to changing my mind and put it right back in the same spot. Because after all, I didn't need the data, just needed the power. Lucky for me, I had a transformer sitting right here. One of the things I really like to do with these batteries is to put a transformer on the input and the output. So the output is obviously your standard don't burn out the cabling kind of deal, but the input is to limit the amount of charge that goes into the battery at a time. So that's kind of handy for when you have a total blackout situation and you're trying to charge the batteries. Well, these batteries will pull all the power they can to fill up, but if you put a limit on it, then you could actually recharge the station batteries upstream and deal with that. 'Cause sometimes I don't know how the prioritization goes as far as the network goes, power network, but some things won't even turn on if the batteries are pulling so much. It's one of the reasons that my solar chip up top has a battery of its own, because the assumption was is if I had just enough power to turn on the chip, they could orient themselves and boost the power. But with the batteries, they're sucking all the power out before it even goes to the chip. So one of those, I guess the batteries are more important kind of deal. So with the transformer on the input of the batteries, you can, as long as you got power generation that exceeds the requirements, then you can have all of your stuff working and charging the upstream batteries. Now, that does not help with that particular case that I mentioned because I don't have any input limitations on those individual batteries on the power generation side. But since these are secondary batteries for each system, then that is potentially something that could change. Right now I'm just trying to clean up some of the wiring from the old LarRe setup and just trying to remember where everything's plugged in, which I really should have words are hard. Grab the sensor glasses and looked at where everything is running. So I don't necessarily want to open up my oxygen rich environment to the composter, which is on the other side, which is a volatile rich environment. Now There's not very many volatiles. However, I don't need to be throwing that into the air. Now at the current temperature, they wouldn't combust. But the first time I ran a production machine, you betcha they would. Yeah, so there's that input transformer that I'm talking about. Now this is virtually meaningless. So all it does is limit the charging rate of these batteries. And if this was on the primary side, I wouldn't even bother. But since this is secondary, I figured I could easily load and distribute. And if I recall correctly, there is a loss going from battery to battery anyway, or maybe that's a Space Engineers thing and I'm just assuming. But in reality, which this game is actually fairly decent at emulating, you wouldn't want to discharge one battery just to charge another. It's just, you know, if it was 100% conversion and you didn't have any losses, it'd be one thing. So now, one of the things kind of, like I said, the game is pretty good at emulating reality. One of the things it does not do, instance, with the water setup there, you take plant matter that you grow with water, and then you throw it in a composter, and it generates water. More water than you started with. Now in reality that wouldn't happen. The best you could get is a sealed system, and you would have the same amount of water. So you would still have to have input into the system. In that worst case, you would have losses. But it's more of a video game, convenience, you know, that type of thing. It's like you can generate stuff from nothing, so it violates the, you know, laws of conservation. But it's a fun game. It's a mechanic made to simplify your life. So, and in a game like this, where difficulty is is the name of the game, then being able to simplify certain things is very helpful. So I set this sorter up to accept mushroom seeds because that happens to be what I've been growing. And right there I just tested the system. I threw a chute through there just to make sure that the left indeed was the reject. And I think I'll even I don't know if I take that as gospel or if I go and get something else, but in this case I'm starting the chute spaghetti network, and there is quite a bit of it by the time I'm done. And, knowing that there's going to be another sorter in line, I'm trying to figure out how that works with this. So. I find those plastic sheets rather curious because they're floating in the middle of nowhere, seemingly. So again, this bottom chute is the seed input. Making sure this is set to stack size 1. This one I set to, made sure it was set to maximum, because if I happen to be grabbing, let's say, just all mushrooms and nothing else, then I don't need to send them through individually. And there I am forgetting to put an input on that. Input to prime the system. Yep, and I realize that this needs to be named in my name hash to empty out, because I checked that in the IC10 code. So I cycle through every LarRe, and I cycle through every these input or export bins. Either way, the return bin. So the LarRe is based on station and what its assigned station is, or I should say the target, and then the import bin just simply if the inlet slot is occupied, then I force it to close. It'll go right back through and open up again. Shoot spaghetti. So this top line is the return line for anything that gets put in the input bin, which would specifically be seeds and plant material. But it is possible I could chuck something in there, either intentionally or accidentally. So I also have to consider that case. For testing purposes, I'm going to eliminate the fertilizer bin because the code is not updated to handle that yet. So just by simply removing that bin, the code functions exactly as it has been. And I decided to turn the input around here just so I can't accidentally contaminate both systems. Wanted to prime the system, make sure that I have fertilizer in the row, and getting ready to verify that I have the bin's orientation correct. So this code is, it looks like a little bit of code spaghetti, but it does function most of the time. There are a couple oddities. This current generation, if I harvest the seed off of a plant and leave the plant there, it can't deal with it. Later on I did an experiment, which eventually I'll post that programming video, where I was analyzing a plant as it grew up. So in this case I had to switch the stations around because I had them opposite, but this works out kind of in the long run because that put fertilizer and seed mathematically at an advantageous location, so I can use a simplified instruction, and I don't have to create a special case for the fertilizer bin. But I haven't gotten to that quite yet here. And I'm just going through and verifying. There are a couple of static assignments for station numbers and all that. For instance, when I tell it to go plant a seed, I need it to go pick up the seed first. So I have to send it to the seed station. And then I got those dump into memory hashes that have to go at some point, and have an external chip write them. Grab the housing, slap it down over here, try to figure out where best to put it. Slap the chip in. And then at this point, I've got mushroom seeds, I've got the export bin, I've got everything that I need to grow the mushrooms because they don't need any light. It lives! It lives! So it goes to station 3, you're supposed to. See, there's no seed. Go pick up a seed and plant it. Now this is one of those little oddities that I'm talking about. So I go throw it over here and check out the code. And I'm assuming what I did is I forgot to assign or move the station somewhere. So when I go to plant, pick up seed, I set it to the wrong station. So here I'm just double checking that I didn't miss any. So now this should work. Slap it in. LarRe should go back home. Now we should be going to station 3. Yeah. Now he's coming back to grab a seed. He's actually going to the correct station. There you go. Grabs the seed. Goes forward. And he plants it. Alright, then you should move forward to station 4. See, there's no seed. Go back, grab another one, and plant it. So, that's working. Now, for determining, so I need a junction coming back from the return line. And then over here, I need a overflow. I would like to use a flip-flop. The only problem is if one side is obstructed, then it doesn't flip-flop. So I could do a series of flip-flops with overflows and all that, but at this point, I just figured I'd do an overflow. If I could get the orientation right. But that does mean that I need to put a valve to block it so that the overflow will work properly and I won't dump it all over my floor. And then I also decided that I probably should put a valve in each lane just so I can shut off the fertilizer going there for whatever reason. Later, we'll discover that I can't actually reach that bus line shut-off valve. But that's only after I put the walls up. So, there's a bit of a fail there. Or as they would say in Star Trek, shaka, when the walls fell. So LarRe's going on his planting way, and he is happy. He is happy, I am happy. Prime the system with some of my seeds here. And then I also came to another realization that the system will back up if those sorters are plugged. So I had to figure out a way to deal with that. And trying to visualize. I also knew here that I would be feeding the unfiltered back into the system at some point. So in the super simplified setup, and this is just for testing purposes, I wanted to pipe the refuse line, if you will, back in. So as it is set up, the seeds would go into the sorter, and then the mushrooms would pop out the end. Because they aren't part of the sorter, or aren't whitelisted by the sorter. So the only thing that would get intercepted would be the mushroom seeds. But did realize I needed to make a change here, because seeds would be coming in probably in batches of 1, and I don't want it plugging up the sorter because I've got 3 sets of 1 seeds. And here I was trying to figure out how I want to inject the... I was contemplating how to inject it into the composter, but what I needed to figure out was what was going to come out. So this is biomass, but it comes out as a agent ball. So I did. I just took the LarRe agent mix to throw it in to see what it came up with. And here, testing, I throw fertilizer in, and it deletes it. So, got charcoal out of the reagent mix that I threw through there. So, the reagent mix was biomass that needs to run through a centrifuge. I didn't realize that at this moment. I thought that the composter could just deal with it. Little did I know. So that caused a little bit of mayhem further down, which actually is probably later on in the stream, if I recall correctly. Now, again, I apologize for anybody just tuning in that my microphone was not actually working when I did the stream, and I didn't realize it until I went to edit the video. So I'm doing a voiceover, a lazy voiceover, where I'm literally watching my own video and just I'm having a reaction video to my own video or something like that, something of that sort. So here's the refuse line, if you will. The complete refuse line, not just the go resort me. So this is stuff that got through the sorting process and pops out the other side. Now again, there is a problem with this in that I don't have a way to deal with overflow seeds, which I have never harvested 2 seeds from a plant before, but I have seen, at least on the wikis and stuff, that you might be able to increase it by 1. Obviously, if you want more seed, what you do is you save the seeds and you harvest or replant the actual plant. And when I get to soybean, which would be in an episode or 2 here, then that's what I do. I take my soybean seeds, I grow a base crop, and then I take the soybeans themselves and slap them in so I can save the seeds and start regenerating. I'm really glad that I put these little dials in. It's been beautiful, even though it's super simple. It's very robust. So what happens is I select a recipe, I input a number that I want, then I hit the button, and it just makes it. And one of the things I discovered later on is that that's actually part of the instruction of the printer. So if you run out of reagent, so you want to make 100 shoots, but you only got 200 iron, you know, they need 3 per, you're 100 short, it'll make what it can. You throw in more iron, and it'll, without being asked, it just starts making the others. So you get what you order. It's made to order. So here I get the recycler out, and this is prior to realizing I needed to run the reagent mix through the centrifuge. So I thought, oh, I'll just basically put it in line with what's going out to the composter. And I spent an embarrassingly long time trying to figure out why my composter stopped doing what it was doing. Luckily I had like 2,000 items in the queue. Now that I think about it, I think I deleted. That's great. But yeah, I plugged the input, and it caused a few problems and kind of a cascading effect. But that's that would be a future past me. I don't even know how you would say that in a voiceover. A future me as of this video, but a past me as of the voice. Feels like a paradox. Ah, yes, my favorite time of the day where I gotta ban a bot. You know, I could actually probably chop this out and nobody would care. As a matter of fact, I think I'm going to do that. Of course, after I record this. Yay, bot band. Yeah, so trying to determine what's going to go through the shredder. And in this case, it's going to be the overflow seeds. Or not. At the moment, unsorted seeds. Once I get the overflows in, then it would be the overflowed seeds. I kind of stinks about the whole system is I don't have a good way of padding out the number of seeds in the system. Which I guess puts a theoretical limit on the number of plants I can support. And this whole time I'm fighting with jumping over the chute spaghetti and all of this, thinking I need a better way of getting in and out, and I just never stopped to do it. So I've used my jetpack a bunch, jumping over the chutes, smashing my face into the chutes. Luckily, it's actually pretty difficult to hurt yourself. Although one thing I was notoriously good at was dropping ice into a chute for the ice crushers and smashing my helmet up, because apparently when it materializes into space in front of you and you're right on it, the physics engine does not like that. Here I am setting up the final sorter. What I was looking for was a wild card seeds. Because obviously you can see that there's, ingots and ores and there's plant. Problem is, I think that would also do the food. But I don't know for sure. I never tested it. Because I don't see a food item. Now it would be nice to differentiate the two, because obviously seeds, pumpkin seeds, okay, but for the most part seeds aren't really in the same category as the grown fruit of the plant. So I was hoping for a quick exit, and it wasn't going to occur, so I'm going through and try and find seeds. There's the seeds. So, mushroom seed, since that's all I've got right now. That's all I'm dealing with. I figured I would put more LarRe in, because LarRe has reached his limit. Now I'm really happy with the code that I produced for LarRe, even with its flaws. For the most part, as long as you get the first 3 or 4 stations correct, which you can obviously modify later in the code, and if I have enough lines left over when I revamp it, I might put in defines so you can change that in one spot. But this is set up so he will automatically increment the station until he hits the end, and then he'll come back home. Doesn't matter if it's 17 stations or 32. He just knows. The setting can be increased past the end of the stations. So LarRe's setting is the station number. So if you only have 32 stations, you can set it to 33. And it just won't go. Is that how I have it set up? The way I have it set up in code is I have a slot of the stack dedicated to what station it's supposed to be going to. So maybe the last statement I said was wrong. Maybe you can't increase it past the end of the station. But when you read the position, it'll tell you what station it's at. And using that state machine of what station it's supposed to be at, according to the code, just auto increment +1. So as soon as it says 33 in that stack memory location, and it's at 32, and it's idle, it'll say, oh, I'm out of stations. let's go back home, start all over again, and goes back to station 0 and reinitializes. So I'm pretty happy with it how it turned out, even with its little bugs. Like I said, I had a code powwow where I tried to improve it, and I did. There were two particular cases that I had not handled. So the plant died. I did not have any selection for that, which I fixed that, and I tested it, and it was kind of a happy little accident because I didn't have a really good way to test that. But when I was testing it, I stopped generating water and my pipes froze outside, so I ended up contaminating the water supply, which killed off the plants. So luckily, in my test scenario, I was able to test dead plants. So I did change that. And then the other case that I didn't have was if I manually harvested a seed but left the mature plant. It didn't know how to deal with that. After I did my case study staring at wheat growing, I was able to come up with the solution. For anybody that's listening, when the plant is growing and has not yet matured, the seeding value of the plant slot will be -1. As soon as it is mature, then that seeding, I should say seeded or something, anyway, will be 0. And then, or no, hang on a second. Okay, all right. Let me get my facts straight here. So, when it is growing until it is mature, that seeding is -1. As soon as it is mature, and it is still growing towards seed, it will still be -1. However, as soon as it has seeded, that goes to 1. So you will have mature as 1, seeding as 1. That means it is fully grown, fully seeded, it's ready for harvest. Now the way I was having that before is I was looking for that case and then just picking everything up, which worked. Unless you pick the seed and that seeding variable goes to 0. So you will be mature 1, seeding 0, and I did not have a case where LarRe was checking that. So the easiest way to check for that now is I was looking for greater than 0 for seeding. What I needed to do was greater than or equal to 0, because it will be -1 up until it has seeded. So that's one way to check. And then the other thing that I added in there, of course, which I already said, was the mature, or the dead plants, sorry. But I was a little disappointed with my code powwow because I couldn't come up with a good way to handle fertilizer until I realized that I could make an assumption. And what I ultimately came up with, but didn't have time to program because it was late, was that when I go to plant the seed, I can pick up the fertilizer first and then the seed. So I go to plant it, I drop the seed in, and that's always going to go in, and then I can try and drop the fertilizer in, because, well, I don't know if it's empty or not, and if it is empty, it'll drop it. If it's not empty, I'll still have fertilizer in the hopper, and then I can just go empty and start again. Now that will add an extra step in the planting, so, which wouldn't necessarily be a problem if I was going station to station looking for planting. So embarrassing. I got too busy talking about the darn programming and I wasn't watching the video, so I'm not exactly sure what the heck I'm doing right now. Looks like sorters and chutes and all that. I think I was running low on iron. I think that's what I'm going to solve here. One of the things I want to do is put in an order system for ingots and stuff like that, so I don't have to dish those out automatically. Run this like this. Now, if you could automatically load a backpack, that'd be great. Because that would be certainly what it would do. But the other thing you can do is stack these individually into ingots and whatnot. So right now each stack is 50. You could smelt it down and make a stack of 500. So theoretically speaking, you could increase your storage in each silo tenfold. By an order of magnitude. Still had copper in there. Still happy with this particular setup too, so I can unload directly in. Which that in itself was an improvement, but then have the evacuate button where I can just press the button and it spits everything out, shuts off the pumps when it's done. It's kind of an energy savings bit. Stacker! And I'm trying to figure out where to stuff the stacker. So this is to stack the seeds to maximum capacity, so that the onesie twosies don't plug up the line. And here I'm trying to think of where I would put an overflow, and I realized that maybe I should change orientation. And I figured I should probably put this prior to the stacker. But where was I going to put it? Stay tuned for next time. Oh, sorry. Turn it around, shoving it right in line, so essentially it returns to its original function. And I can put the overflow right there. And luckily it just magically worked with the cabling. It just worked. It just works. And that being a corner piece didn't matter. So it was almost like it was destined to be. And I set that to maximum because it won't go over max stack, so it doesn't matter. So here, installing the overflow. So now the overflow, the seeds will pour into the stacker until they can't. And then I take it up and into the ultimate refuse line. So, again, getting back into some spaghetti. And this should... Oh yeah, because the stacker was empty, so... And that worked exactly as intended. Checking function. Now there's a visual indicator that it's going to go through the, at least I thought it was a visual indicator that it was going to go through the overflow, but so I suppose the one way that you could make it so that you had more seeds in a particular chute line would be to lengthen the distance between where the sorters are and the stackers, so you got more pipe in the line. So another thing I probably need to check with LarRe, if I've got the space in the code, would be to see if the seed bin is got anything in it or not. So here we are, getting ready to make some iron. I really appreciate having the pressure and temperature readout right there. I don't even have to look at the gauge or anything. And I think I was going to make a bunch of chutes and realized I had a bunch of chutes laying right there. What are we at? 22.5% battery. Here we are. The age-old question. How do I want to start this? Because I don't even have room to work. You know, computers used to complain about not having memory. This is how they felt. My hands are full, I can't pick something else up. Memory overflow. So now this line up here that I'm working on, of course, is the overflow / rejected line. So anything that went through the sorters, the overflow from the seeds. And then, in this case, it's a little dangerous. So if I just happen to be an idiot and accidentally throw my wrench into a bin, I would try throwing it into the composter as it is set up right now. I do address that.
Hydration critical.
But that's more accidental. Intentionally accidental, accidentally intentional. I was just thinking along the lines of an additional line of composters or something. But we'll address that when we actually get to that problem. So now I'm trying to figure out how I want to bring the output from the gardens into this sorter system. Or more specifically, the output from the composters as well. So Gets a little spaghetti-ish. Yeah, and in this case, I'm trying to bypass the. I want it so the fertilizer can come into the system hot. And thus begins the great wall of shoots. Always makes me nervous using a wrench near frames. Just to make fun of me, it had to leave its little droppings on the floor. Ah, yes. Spaghetti. Standing on fertilizer is one of those things just kind of sounds gross. In reality, too. Now, in this case, it is straight up compost, so that's not necessarily a problem. But you know, fertilizers when you're dealing with animals. So there's two things I need to have had here. Is an overflow so that the composters can always work and generate the water that they need to. And then, backwards you idiot, a junction so I can manually throw fertilizer into the system as well. So in this case I wanted to make sure that the overflow from the fertilizer was far enough away that it didn't try injecting itself in through the inlet. Now I can play basketball. Whee! Woohoo! I should play in the Olympics. The Martian Olympics. So, LarRe's working. Happy LarRe's working. Doing what he needs to do. Now I'm looking for spacing and cabling requirements in this particular case. Not just playing around and jumping around like I normally do. Just making sure that I've got the spacing requirements that I need. And I thought LarRe was going to be a problem, but then I realized LarRe and the sorters and everything are all on the same bus, so it doesn't matter. One consideration I do need to make is for grow lights, though. Grow lights and regular lighting. So in the case of the mushrooms, it doesn't matter. But I still want to have a system working for that. And I was also contemplating if I actually wanted to have a LarRe this close to the sorter arrays and everything that I'm going to have for processing the garden. And I decided, what the heck? besides that, I got tired of jumping over these hydroponics trays, so...
Hunger critical.
No, I'm hungry. I got the munchies. All this gardening. Yep, just trying to clean up a little bit. Hitting my head. Cold French fries. My favorite. Don't need a laptop open anymore. Even though I'm fairly certain that's a wireless battery, but still. Little bit of cleanup. So eventually, not all the food will be going straight into the composter. That eventually I gotta figure out. Grow lights, unplugging the grow lights. One thing that does kind of annoy me is that there is no automatic reagent processor. That would be extraordinarily helpful in cases of soy and wheat. But at least those stack pretty tall, so you can go through the process. So here I am trying to determine where I want to set the grow lights. And it's kind of annoying you can't like flip them over and do the back side. So I had to put the walls up and then I had to do it from the bottom. Purging the memory a little bit. Squish. Peel back the walls. want that set up. It's a stripe. I decided to put against putting a wall piece there because I was going to need a way of getting around. And obviously with the chutes up front, that made it a little bit difficult. So here I was trying to figure out in particular how I wanted to orient these. I believe I was looking in here for some kind of indication where the center of light was or how large the light is. I know it's the equivalent to 5 small grid spaces, basically a cube. And I believe it's centered on the power leg. So I was trying to figure out exactly where I wanted to put it. Getting in a fight with the hydroponics trays on the other side here. There we go. We have grow lights. Now the next bit was going to be controlling them, which obviously for mushrooms you don't need to do, but I still wanted to get the layout and a little bit of that OCD thing where I like everything being uniform. Although I won't murder anybody over it because it's very nice when it's symmetric, but if it's not, then generally doesn't bother me too much. So, still trying to determine the best way for getting power over to it. Now eventually I'm going to have a problem, and I'll have to address it, is the power requirements for the different lights. So each lane may need to have its own power controller for the lights and whatnot. And I decided I wanted to change the wall layout here. So I wanted pass-through of air and stuff like that, so I figured that the grates would do best for that. But those walls did serve their function. They got my grow lights up there. I forgot about my iron. grading. Make a handful of those. Pew pew, pow pow pow. Put the backpack away. Now it is unfortunate that those mining backpacks can't actually put finished ingots into them, because that would be very helpful, particularly when you're making alloys that require steel. So let's do a little not so blind taste test here and see which version looks best. I was figuring on two or three. Which I did not keep the pattern with the next row. The next row of, let's see, when I put in the soy. So I do need to go back and do that. But yep, I decided type 3 looked the best. The hardest part, balancing. I was never good on the balance beam. Just trying to determine where the ladder chute would do better. And none of the options were really good. And that bugged me because the bars were the incorrect direction. So I was pretty happy how that turned out. I was contemplating how I wanted to run the wiring here. Trying to keep in mind that I would have multiple lanes of LarRes. Trying to figure out where I wanted to put the IC housing that would control the lights. And I was contemplating how I wanted to go about auxiliary lighting too for me walking through the aisle. Maybe that should be adequate lighting for me walking down a tunnel. Of course, I fell short a couple fixtures, but let's start. Decided I couldn't take that there anymore. Now for walls. I felt geometrically inclined. I knew I needed an occupancy sensor. Now I wanted housing, IC10, and a switch. 2 switches, actually. It's almost as exciting as watching paint dry. So I'm making the IC10 right now with the switches on the display so I can make them. I'm trying to figure out where I want to stuff this. Yeah, it's trying to determine the best route about this because in addition to having the occupancy sensor in the dials, I need to also have some sort of power separation device, whether that be an APC or transformer or something, to isolate the grow lights on the network. That way I can individually control them per lane as opposed to the universal. Now what I could do some creative stuff too with the dials and probably either a logic reader or something like that, so that I could control the grow lights all from one chip, but I didn't really want to do that. Got a little overcomplicated. And an expandable system is great when it's simple. It's kind of why I like the LarRes, because literally all I need to do is get the first 2 or 3 stations right, name LarRe, name the still can't remember if they're import or export bins, but and then just slap down trays and stations. So LarRe itself was kind of independent. Getting in a fight with it. There we go. Making LarRe into his own room. So it might be worth doing like a wall heater or a wall cooler or something like that at some point to adjust the temperatures in the rooms. But I will have to analyze plants and see how far from norm some of the plants like. And that might be more of an exception than a rule. But one of the things I would like to do is to make sure that the carbon dioxide, nitrogen, whatever the plants need is actually present and all that. So with these rooms completely sealed off, that poses a problem. And maybe the simplest solution would be to have a standard air mix, because I don't think, well, some of the alien plants might, that's a different story. But as far as the standard ones, they are going to be okay with a standard atmosphere with carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and oxygen. So I have an inlet where I can heat up and cool the reservoir, so to speak. So the standard temperature is kind of 20 degrees, 25 degrees. And I could have the air that I inject into the room at a certain temperature. I guess it still doesn't get away from having to have a way to heat and cool the room, because the air is only going to do so much. Unless I have a hot line and a cold line of the same air mix and have like ridiculously high temperatures to inject the fresh air in. So if the room's a little cool, we inject hot air. If the room's a little warm, we inject cool air. I don't know. It's a consideration. So now we got the dials. So one's to control the length of the day, one's to control the length of the night. Daylight and nightlight seemed appropriate. And gotta hook this guy up, hook those guys up. One short every time. Now I'll go through and turn on the lights. So not only is this particular chip going to need to control the grow lights, it's also going to have to control the occupancy controlled lights. Which that's super simple to do since I've only got one type of light. I could expand the code out if I wanted to put it on the workshop or something, but this code in particular I wouldn't bother. The LarRe code, that might be worth refining to put on there. So now to get the power separation device, which in this case I decided it needed to be a transformer. Now an APC with a nuclear battery or something would probably be also been an option. Or just a large battery even, because it's just lighting. And I generally don't run out of power. It's a little more apparent at the moment. But it's such a long time in between each storm. Really what I need to do is I've got 3 arrays of wind power, and the third array has only 3 batteries, so there's a lot of wasted energy in the storm there. Actually having power switches would be kind of neat, but short of using like 2 transformers, I don't know how you'd be able to do that. And this is where I figured out that rail is in the way. That's not going to work. Dummy. Try again. Yeah, put it on the wall. There we go. Now we're going to have some lights. So since I put that wall up, I wanted to make sure that LarRe would actually work properly. It was at this moment I knew that wasn't going to work. I'm also having a problem trying to figure out how the heck to get to get up. And time to edit some code. So this is for the grow light control. So obviously up at the top here, I'm going to do our defines and hash for the dial. The name hash for the daylight and the name hash for the nightlight. And don't forget the grow light, because we're going to be controlling those as well. Occupancy sensor, grow light, regular lights. So the beauty of these is you use the batch network using the name, and you don't have to name anything, you don't have to set anything. It's just a matter of making sure that everything is isolated like it's supposed to. Just taking a guess at the structure. Hey, look at that. I managed to guess it right. And now for variables. So obviously we need to know daytime, we need to know nighttime, number of occupants. The other thing we also need to be aware of is where we are in the timer cycle. Now I was trying to determine here what I want to put in the initialization loop. Usually in the initialization loop you'll want to make sure that specific devices are on. In this case, dials don't have power, the occupancy sensor doesn't have a power setting. So essentially I just wanted to make sure that variable was 0. That was just basically to make sure it started in a sane state. So here we're gonna load batch, and there we go. So I need to get the daytime from the dial, whatever it's set to. And I decided to take an average just in case for some stupid reason there's 2 dials hooked up. And then we don't want necessarily the sum because that could be crazy. Average would be better. So same with the nighttime. We need to get the nighttime dial. And then it's a matter of figuring out where we are in like the day timer. So the important thing is that 1 second is 2 ticks. So that's why I do 2 yields, so that is 1 second of wait there. I didn't want to do a sleep command because then the occupancy sensor light control wouldn't work. At least until, happen to wait X, daytime number of seconds or nighttime number of seconds before it checks again. So this way it's continuously looping through. So R15 is going to be the daytime plus nighttime in this case. So that is the maximum time. So if our daytimer has exceeded that amount, then we want to jump back up to initialization and go back to 0, restart. So now we don't have to worry about the overflow. So set less than. And I didn't have any registers defined. I was debating whether I needed to use a different register or if I could just use the same one. And yeah, exactly. I need to throw in another register while I was thinking about it. So light status, that's grow light status, by the way. So as long as the daytimer, so our current counter, is less than daytime, we want it turned on. And then in this case, it's just a matter of setting the grow lights to that light status. And as a matter of fact, we don't even need to check against nighttime because we have R15 there. So R15 is the grand total of daylight and nightlight added together. So if we set less than daytimer, daytime, as long as we're underneath daytime, the lights will be on. We're over that, it'll be off. And we will reset when it's 0. And then, of course, increment daytimer. So we know that we've waited a second. Now, I don't know if these individual instructions add any processing time. When you're doing low-level CPU work, they certainly do. They eat up a number of clock cycles. In this case, I don't know if that's truth or not. So anyway, so we're going to load from the occupancy sensor the number of people that are in there. And I don't need to use a name because there should only be one occupancy sensor. But then again, you never know. Somebody might hook something up wrong. So I take the average. I don't want to do sum. Which I guess sum and average kind of have the same thing in effect, the way I'm checking it here. So set R15 as long as number of people is greater than 0. So if there's anybody in, R15 is going to be 1. If there's nobody in, that's going to be 0. So branch greater than 0, AL. So if there's anybody in the room. In which case I just decided that if there's anybody in the room, that's going to be greater than 0 anyway, so I don't even need to do the set command. So we want to turn on lights. And essentially what this does is make sure that the lights are on and sets a specific delay timer. So this is what allows the lights to stay on for a certain amount after. And realizing now that that's actually literally 10 seconds, I could probably cut that in half. But we turn the lights on and reset the delay timer to 10. And then jump back in line. And then if it is equal to 0, which these two conditions are mutually exclusive, we turn off lights. So in this case, turn off lights. We're going to subtract 1 from delay timer, essentially. And then this is where the set greater than would come in handy. Because you don't want to set on to 10, 9, 8, you just want it on is 1. So set greater than 0, delay timer. Well, yeah, R15. R15, R14, what do I put here? Come on, think about it. Yeah, R15, our temporary variable that we use everywhere. So as long as delay timer is greater than 0, R15 will be on, or 1. 1, on, true, whatever you want to say. So we set wall light to that value. Now, theoretically speaking, I believe these are 32-bit registers, so if I wait 2 billion seconds, which is a very long time, by the way, theoretically I could have overflow and it would turn the lights on. So now I slap it in. If I can figure out where to go. Get in there. So it should be working, and the grow lights should not turn on at all because 0 plus 0. Last time I checked is 0. So I can definitely tell that the room lights have turned on. And I was just verifying that the grow lights are not on. Now in hindsight, if I wanted to be doubly sure that it worked, I should have tried to turn in one of the grow lights on to see if it immediately kicks back off. But I wanted to test. Yep, here we go. So I figured that the maximum settings are actually hidden behind the wall, so I have to peel the plate off to get to that. You get to hear all the pops and creaks from my microphone when I drop the cable and sniff. The extra added benefits. Well, you get to hear the pops and creaks anyway. But usually I've got to push to mute on OBS so you don't hear my coughs and sneezes and all the other assorted bodily noises that the human body loves to make. So I jumped out of there to make sure that the lights turn off. And they indeed do. I was playing around to see if my feet actually counted as me being in the room, and they do. So, I feel like a ping pong ball. Boom, lights come on after a up to 1 second delay. And I'm happy with that. 32 grow stations all set up. And interestingly enough, I didn't have a problem with LarRe crashing into the wall when it went back home until I reloaded. Which is why I didn't bother fixing it in this current state. So I wanted to check my water to make sure that that was still good. Temperature's good. It's not polluted. Because I have had a problem with the water line rupturing at some point. And I do have a system for evacuating that, but what I really need to do is isolate the cooling room, so if I do have a breach that I don't contaminate everything. So in this case, I got my spaghetti network all set up. I'm getting into a fight with trying to jump over it. Making sure that our battery was charged. This is where I started tuning down. Basically, so I've got the force splitters, or force stackers rather, which are consuming 200 watts by themselves, and then all the other auxiliary stuff. What I was hoping to do here is actually overdraw the battery a little bit with the lights on, and it just wasn't doing it. So 200 definitely does it because the stackers themselves take 200. And 300 should recharge it. Barely. Well, actually, I take that back. That shredder there. So that shredder takes 100 just sitting there. So between the stackers and the shredder, that's 300 watts. The IC housing, I think, takes 50. So that's 100 watts there for the two housings. So, but end up being happy with that. I'm going to call it there for the night. So I hope you appreciated this special adventure. And we'll see you next time.